I think the business leader should be saying what could go wrong and then what could go right. It could be interest rates rise and volume goes down, or it could be something very general like a recession hits the whole economy. Yeah. We're in a cyclical industry. We're going to have a recession. I don't know when, but I want everybody to have a recession contingency plan. Figure out what's going to happen if your orders go down 40% and how will your division be profitable.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Keys to Real Estate. I'm Mary Schuster. Well, today it's part 2 of Dr. Bill Conerly. If you missed part 1, I really recommend you go back and catch it. In it, we discuss some fundamentals of the economy that are really impacting the real estate market, and I found his insights really helped me figure out what's important. Thankfully, he monitors all the minutiae so we don't have to. Now, in today's episode, we're talking leadership and building for the future with strong fundamentals. And he's got terrific ideas and also some practical assignments. So let's get back to my conversation with Dr. Bill Conerly. The presenting sponsor for this season of Keys to Real Estate is Closing Lock. Working in title, do you ever feel like you've got a target on your back? Every year, $2 trillion moves in and out of escrow accounts in the United States. Fraudsters are watching and waiting for one wrong click, one unsecured email, just one oversight. And then just like that, your client's life savings are gone. That's where Closing Lock comes in. Closing Lock provides title companies a secure, all-in-one platform to prevent fraud, protect funds, and streamline closings. Over 1 million home sales have closed safely without incident in Closing Lock. The fraudsters only have to be right once. Title companies have to be right every time. Closing Lock has your back. Visit closinglock.com today to learn more. Dr. Conerly, welcome back for part 2 of our conversation today.
Great to be chatting with you again, Mary.
Well, if anybody missed it, last time we went through a lot of the elements of the economics that impact the work we do in the real estate title and settlement world. Today, I'd kind of like to go a little bit bigger picture, if you will, and talk about, last time we were looking about 6 to 12 months out, really. I'd really like to talk about more building stronger foundations for the future after we're kind of past whatever this moment is. And if we start to build and plane out into where we're going, I'd really like to future talk with you a little bit if we can do that. Those foundations are just really critical. So I'd like to talk some in depth, if we can, about sort of our dynamics going on in our labor market. What do you see there?
Yeah, well, we are in an unusual period. And let me just give some historical perspective here. We had a baby boom, 1946, and it actually continued into the early 60s. A lot of kids, big families, everybody had a family, and a lot of 4-child families. And the first baby boomers came of their working age in the 1970s. And then the later baby boomers hit their working age in the 1980s. And then the early baby boomers had their children fairly soon. And those kids came of working age in the 1990s and the 2000s. So for a 40-year period from 1970 through about 2010, we had huge growth of the working age population. And something else was also happening. Women, we've always had women, as far as I can tell.
We've always had them, but we weren't yet happening.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
There were about 1/3 of adult women working in that 1960, 1970 period. We went from 1/3 of adult women working to over 60% of adult women working. So we had a huge bulge in the number of working age people, and women entered the workforce. It was labor abundance. Mm-hmm. And that meant that the manager always had a line of job applicants out the door.
Yeah.
And the manager could be very picky, and the manager could also be rude. And, say, hey, Conerly, time for a haircut. And I mean, as an 18-year-old working in a retail store, I knew there was a line of people looking for my job. I got a haircut.
Yeah.
And in many businesses, especially family businesses, the leader today was taught how to be a manager by mom or dad, grandpa or grandpa, who went through that period of labor abundance. But we're in a tight labor market, and it's not just the pandemic We had a tight labor market in 2018. I started hearing business leaders. I go around, I talk a lot to trade associations and corporate boards of directors. And in addition to me speaking, I'm always asking, hey, what's going on in your business? What are your challenges? What are your opportunities? And I started hearing before the pandemic about the tight labor market. And when I looked at the statistics on the working age population, the current decade from 2020 to 2030 will have the lowest growth of the working age population since the Civil War. The lowest growth of the working age population since the Civil War. It gets a little better after 2030. So if you've got
good. Okay, if we just hold out till then.
just a little better, and then in the 2030s and 2040s, but certainly for 5 years, and then it'll take a while to get a little better. I think business leaders, regardless of the industry, need to be thinking of a long-term labor shortage and need to have a long-term strategy. It's kind of easy when you have a position to fill. Oh, I need to get a salesperson. I need to get this production person. But what I think businesses really need is a strategy. How are we going to progress in this era of labor shortage?
Do you have any tips or tricks?
Yeah, the first thing I suggest, it's a three-step process, is improve productivity.
Okay.
And some people, and I'm not talking about whipping people harder.
Darn it. Just kidding.
But better tools, and it could be a software tool, particularly in real estate, in things like construction. It could be a better drill or saw, whatever. Better tools, better training.
Okay.
There are people who are trying as hard as they can, and with a little bit of coaching, a little bit of outside help, they'd be more productive. And then managers, better management helps productivity. Managers who can help employees stay focused on the most important thing rather than just the thing that seems to be the next on the list. So improving productivity, and we ought to circle back to talk about AI, but let me just sort of leave that as a category.
Okay.
And the second thing is better employee retention. And there's an 80-20 rule. In marketing, it's 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers. In managing employees, I think that 80% of the manager's time is spent with 20% of the employees.
I could not agree more.
And do you think it's the top 20%?
No, I
employees?
don't. Not based on my
The
experience.
middle 20? No, you're right. Yeah. Talking to employees is probably the most important thing. Understanding who they are, what motivates them, what frustrates them, and encouraging them is probably the best step towards employee retention. And you've heard that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers.
Yes.
And so many people quit because the boss is a jerk. And if we could just de-jerkify the ranks of our bosses, we'd solve the retention problem.
All right. What's the third thing? We have productivity. We have retention. Yeah. What's the third thing?
Better recruiting.
Recruiting.
And there are two elements there. First of all, the things that help retention, help recruiting. If your employees are engaged, if they like the job, if they look forward to going into the job, they're going to recommend the job to other people. And not just their friends, but people they see at church once a month or at the softball league, whatever. So that's important. But also keeping a pipeline. Okay, I don't have a need right now. I talked to one person who had a specialty company, and he said, man, I've got 3 different production employees, and if I lost them, I don't know how I'd find a replacement. But one of the things that this guy was not doing was keeping resumes if somebody walked in when he did not have an opening. And I'm like, throw them in a folder and call them back. Not just when you have an opening, but call them back 6 months later. Hey, we still don't have anything, but like to stay in touch.
Yeah.
And keep a pipeline.
Well, before we go back to productivity, so you're right, retention and recruiting, hearing you talk about both of those things is where I really start to feel the truth of what you said before, which was basically if you learned how to be a manager in the 70s or 80s, you're managing people wrong now because it's a different equation. And it's not just that the people are different. And, we can put our grumpy pants on and go, oh, well, these kids want to know how I feel about what they feel. But it's not that as much as there's an element. These kids are different than we are, for sure. But it's more of a We were also taught how to be managers when there was an abundance of labor out there. Yeah. That kind of is a game changer. And even I sort of bumped instinctively when you said, hey, maybe you've got somebody that isn't your best performer, but if you can get them some outside help, maybe they could rise up and meet the bar. And first I go, or I could just not pay them. But it's no, that's the old way. That is, there's 1,000 more fish in the sea, and the sea is not that full anymore, is it?
Right. I'm not against firing the worker that's just not getting the job done, but especially the disruptive worker. You have some who are bringing other people down, and everybody's happier when Fred leaves. No insult to people named Fred, but you know what I mean?
Fred's probably a problem.
But a good manager has to understand the people. Is this guy always going to be a jerk? Or does he need some coaching about how to stay focused on the job? Does he really, you taught the person the job once, but how many times has somebody explained something to you once and you still don't? And the next time you do it, I think about coaching a spouse in a software application. I use Word and Excel all the time. And if somebody else in the family needs a little help, I'm like, I explained this to you last time. Just having some understanding.
Yeah. Well, and even in the recruiting, when you talked about that aspect, I thought, oh yeah, you are dating each other now in the interview and recruiting. Before it was sort of the prospective employee was the one putting on their best foot forward, and that was
you convinced me why I should hire you.
That's exactly it. And now they want to know about your brand, your culture. What will my experience be like working here? What are your values? What's important? And we go, well, can we talk about the work? But no, that again, they are in higher demand now than some of us that came up earlier were accustomed to. And so we have to show off, that we all have to put our feathers out and say, look, this is our best selves. Yeah.
An expert I was talking with recently said, if you think you found the right person, make the offer right away. Because if the person's the right person and is looking, somebody else is going to make an offer. Don't wait. When I was in the corporate world, it was amazing how long it took for decisions to be made. And somebody is kept waiting. And if some other offer comes in, okay, I don't think this is as good as the one that they're not getting back to me on.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like back in the probably late 80s where I lived had an exceedingly tight rental market for housing. And we had that rule too. If you walk in and you don't hate it, write a deposit check right now, because if you go see the next 6 that you're scheduled to see, come back, it'll be gone. And I think there's just a lot of people that haven't realized that the employment sector that's a reality in that space right now too. Okay, good. Okay, well, finally, we're going to get back around to number 1, then the productivity. I'm dying to hear your thoughts about the AI and the impact there.
Yeah, and I have 2 sons, smarter than their dad, both of them working in AI. One on the guts of it, and the other one is a more relevant story. Most of your folks, most of the people watching this, don't need to know anything about the guts inside an AI.
Right.
It's a black box. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest benefits that businesses are going to get does not come from people using Chat GPT or Claude or Gemini. It will come from a piece of software that just does a job better. So a person maybe, and I was talking to an electrical contractor who's moving in this direction, they get electronic blueprints and they have to estimate what will it cost to do, say, the electrical work. And the new way is the blueprint file is put into a program, and the program uses AI to figure out how many feet of wire, how many feet of conduit, how many switches, how many plugs, and how long will it take in this particular configuration to install all of that. And the worker sort of moving just a file, okay, move this file over here and click the process button, doesn't know any AI, but is working on a very specific application that uses AI. And we have thousands of startup companies, and that's where I mentioned one of my sons is at one of these little startup companies that has just found a very narrow, repetitive task, and let's use AI so that somebody doesn't have to do that. And so I would say to somebody in running a real estate business, what are the repetitive tasks that your people do, and look for an AI app. Now, there's not, going to be an app for every possible task.
But we have some good ones customized for our space. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
do.
Exactly. And that's going to be the game changer. If the employee is doing something repetitive and the employee is not aware that there's an AI tool out there, I think the manager should be saying, hey, are there any tools that would make you more productive? And if the employee doesn't know, the manager may know. That's why it's valuable to go to like association meetings, educational forums, and even if the official program doesn't have a discussion of the tools, there may be sponsors out in the cocktail area with their table. And those are really worth going to find out what are the tools that can help your people be more productive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, forgive me if I don't remember who exactly it was yesterday, but somebody just announced they did a fairly large layoff of their coding engineers because 30% of their code is now being written by AI. It was one of the tech companies,
Right.
and nobody can guess the pace of evolution of this, but at some point I would think that it is going to start impacting employment.
Yeah. And, I go in two directions there.
Okay, go.
And I'll share those with you. One is, with programmers being more productive because they have this tool allowing them to do more in a given amount of time, but we should have less need. But there's also a large technical debt. A technical debt is when you create a program that doesn't have the functionality you would really like, and you'll get to it later.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times do you go to a website and you think this is a blankety blank, 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 blank website?
Routinely, yeah.
I have to put in a phone number. Okay. And it's like, I'm not much of a programmer, but I could write something that says, I don't care whether the user puts in dashes or not, or spaces or what. I can figure that out.
It'll be okay.
But there are websites all over the internet that need to be upgraded.
There are.
So, and internal systems that need to be upgraded so that some employee has an easier time. So that, with programming effectively being cheaper, I think that we will see improvement there. I'm an optimist, but it also means that the programmers will not be in such a laid off position. There'll still be increased demand, but I think their wages will probably be lower than they were, particularly a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I expect so. I'm concerned about the economics of it. But I'll tell you what I am optimistic about. And it's not that I'm pessimistic about that. I think we'll figure it all out. Every time something new like this comes along, we're in a bit of a for a little bit, and then we settle down, we figure it out. I am excited about seeing when we eliminate some of these by rote tasks that you learn to do a certain way. And it doesn't even mean necessarily if this, then that. It can be, some of our decision trees around underwriting, for example, can be quite complex. And that can be a specialty, and that's all fine. But when we can lift some of that monotonous stuff off of people, and if they can adopt a more curious mindset, I'm especially enthused about it for the early career folks who often feel pigeonholed, often feel held back, often feel like we won't get out of their way yet. And if they can bring that dose of curiosity to any job and figure out how to enhance it and broaden it out with the help of some of these tools, oh, I'd love to have a second chance at my career with that enabled earlier on. Yeah. I think I'd kill it.
And it's going to bring out an additional value that some people will provide and others won't, which is the personal relationship.
Yes.
So in a typical real estate transaction, there's a lot of conversation among the buyer, the seller, the agents, the title insurance, the escrow folks, all of that. And the tools will smooth that. There are fewer simple, hey, is this paperwork done? Or, what do I need to do? But you still need some face-to-face. And the people who are good at relating to others, forming a bond, a connection, building trust, they will become very valuable, because just the relationships, it'll be a different kind of relationship, but the relationship is still critical. And I think that people will continue to buy from people they know and trust, rather than just an AI bot that works well.
That's a really neat point. We spend a lot of time in this sector talking about the other side of the AI, which is how it just has exploded our fraud instances in such ways that we're working every day and sharing information every day of here's the latest. And when you've got somebody that looks like you on a video saying, hey, I told you to send my money to here, but instead I need it sent over there. So to limit liability, we have to focus on that. And we don't spend as much time focusing over here on the revenue side, the opportunity side, the enrichment side, because we have to be so, lock the doors as best you can, because we handle, as you know, a lot of other people's money, and it's very important. So I love having an opportunity to sort of dream on the human side of that equation a little bit. It's cool. Right. I'm wondering, from your perspective, what do you think makes a difference or separates businesses that thrive in uncertainty from those who hesitate or falter a little bit in these kind of times?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. If you look at, well, I have a friend who is a successful entrepreneur, and when he was young, liked to read the biographies of other successful entrepreneurs before he had become successful. And when you read those biographies, you see people who just kept persisting. They knew where they wanted to go and they went there. I think that's a bad technique, because the future is uncertain. Certainly 1 out of 1,000 people who just doggedly pursue one thing will succeed. But many people will find they're not pursuing the right thing, or it was the right thing, but then things changed and they're doing it the wrong way. So I think that the stability needs to be in core values and honesty, trustworthiness, that sort of thing. But the details, a business, okay, you've got a business in this field. And I think the business leader should be saying, what could go wrong? And then what could go right? And what could go wrong could be a very specific thing. In the real estate, it could be we get hit with fraud. It could be interest rates rise and volume goes down. Or it could be something that's very general, like another pandemic a recession hits the whole economy. Yeah. But I would recommend that people, if it's a small business, maybe just the owner, but if it's if there's a management team, just spend a little time outlining what would they do under all of these contingencies. And I suggest it be a 1-page document. And the page is, hey, these are the things that might hurt us, and here are the steps we would take. Not a 3-ring binder, unless you're going to hire a consultant to help you develop that, right, and burn up many, many billable hours. Yeah. That's the only value there. But 1 page. And then after you've worked through what could go wrong, turn the piece of paper over and start saying, what are the good surprises that we might be hit with?
The opportunities that could come.
Yeah. Something that, and what would we do? And the value of this was illustrated. Caterpillar company, big machines.
Yes.
They were booming in the early 2000s. 2003, 4, 5. Construction companies wanted big yellow machines. The mining industry was booming. Agriculture was booming. They all wanted big yellow machines. And the head of Caterpillar called the management, like the 200 managers together, and said, we're in a cyclical industry. We're going to have a recession. I don't know when, but I want everybody to have a recession contingency plan. Figure out what's going to happen if your orders go down 40%. And how will your division be profitable? And the CEO is saying this in a boom.
Right.
The managers thought the old man's crazy. We don't have time to put this
together. We're too busy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they did. And then 2008 comes around. And the first half of the year, we didn't know then that we were technically in a recession. But then when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, the big banks, the collapse, the stock market collapsed. At that time, many corporations dithered, and they wanted to wait for the next quarterly report or form a task force.
Yeah, you can't.
But Caterpillar, they pulled those contingency plans off the shelf. They reviewed them, take an hour or two. Is this really, has anything changed? And then they executed like that.
I love that. It's so efficient. And not only is it efficient for the situation, it's so efficient compared to your closest competition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the quality of the thinking.
Yes.
So imagine that you're wondering, am I going to make payroll? Is the bank going to call in loans? Everything is going bad. You're in a panic. What's the quality of your decision making? As opposed to kicking around ideas with your colleagues. Yeah, we would want to do this. We would want to do that. We'd want to stick with our values. And the good Caterpillar example is they sell almost everything through dealers. A company in tight straits might say, well, let's take advantage of the dealers. I mean, they wouldn't put it that way,
Right.
but let's push all of the pain onto dealers. And Caterpillar said, we need our dealers to stay in business. They need to share the pain, but they cannot absorb all of the pain.
But Caterpillar had more time to come up with better thoughts than everybody else's first thought, which is, oh, there's a place we could let them absorb over there. It's like, no, that's not the best thing to do. And it gives you that, yes, when you're not in crisis, that greater 360 view and time to think it through slowly instead of just react. And to your point, or wait to get more data and then react way too late.
Right. When I wrote a book on that subject called The Flexible Stance, Thriving in a Boom-Bust Economy.
I'm going to read that book.
And the first half is about the things that can be surprisingly wrong. Economic forecasts can go wrong. I shouldn't tell you that.
No.
But surprises in technology, surprises in government regulation, in social attitudes, and in competition. So as I was preparing it, I reached out to a number of people, a person in the title insurance business. I said, how do you deal with this? You know, it's boom bust, a little bit of a drop in interest rates and your volume goes up. And he said, well, every year I start the year thinking, what do I do if my revenue goes down 30%? And sketch it out. I talked to a plywood manufacturer, and plywood prices go way up when there's a hurricane rolling through the southeast. And he said he asked all of his plant managers to have a plan to rapidly increase production by 1/3. How are you going to find the people? How are you going to find the raw materials? So it's a downside plan. It's an upside plan. And one of the other conversations, last one I'll mention here, is a banker. And I said to the banker, what's the difference between the companies that you have worked with who couldn't pay back their loans and those who did pay back their loans, bankruptcy versus continuing? And several bankers said how fast they responded to difficulties. Some people just want to, nobody likes to lay people off.
I know.
But in order to keep the company and the other jobs, sometimes action has to be taken quickly.
That's really fair. Hey, tell me if this is too much of a curveball. I'll apologize and withdraw the question if it is. But one of the things that we're really kind of starting to watch in our industry, we're starting to give it kind of the side eye, is the availability and premiums associated with P&C insurance, housing, fire, flood, all that stuff. We did a survey of both lending and the entitlement settlement world and asked about, because no two markets are the same. So what's going on in your market? And the number of people who said they are so concerned about the availability and pricing of hazard insurance for the homes. And in some areas, it's starting to cause deals to not happen. A lot of people are also getting tax jumps at the same time. I just wonder if, do you have concern about the P&C market's healthiness overall, or do you think that it's kind of balanced enough to be okay for a while?
I've got some anecdotes and a little bit of information. The anecdotes is, and being in the West, wildfire risk is a big deal. And my insurance agent recently mentioned that there are counties in Oregon where he just can't get any insurance.
They don't write. Yeah, they don't write. Yeah.
And that kind of depends on local risk more than anything. In the aggregate level, the losses to the insurance industry have gone up, but a lot of the total industry losses that you may see reflect people moving to more dangerous places. So you get a lot more hurricanes in Florida than you do in Ohio.
Yeah, right.
And, there are the tornado prone areas. And although I've never thought of New England weather as being safe, apparently, even if you get cold and snow, there are far fewer losses in New England than there are in Florida or Texas. And as folks have migrated south, they've been migrating into areas with more natural disasters.
Yeah, it's one we're keeping a close eye on. But at least typically their reserves are pretty well capitalized, and so I'm not saying the B word yet, the bailout word yet. I'm not even contemplating such a thing. But I'm not staying awake at night watching it, but I am keeping an eye, because that's one that could go broke slowly and then all at once, right?
Right. Yeah.
First slowly and then all at once. All right, I have just a couple more. I know I've kept you so long, but I could talk to you all day. I enjoy it, and I know our audience is too. I'm wondering, business leaders, I know you talk to a lot of them, you interact with many of them. If you could insert just one thing into every business leader's brain, or if there's something you wish they would know more about, what would that be? What gift of insight would you give them?
Yeah, I think I would come back to the tight labor market.
Yeah.
That it's going to persist for a while. AI may ease it for some of the kind of desk jobs, but for people involved in construction, AI is going to be a little bit slow. There will be some peripheral benefits, but the trades, people working with their hands, agriculture is going to be slow to benefit from AI. So I think that just the tight labor market should be on everybody's mind.
I think you're right. I did not understand until we talked today how big of a key component that is to how much it impacts everything. Well, so finally, I hear from people every day who, some people are kind of amused by these times, saying, man, let's wait and see what happens. Anything could happen. It's like, 52 card pickup. I don't know where it's going to be. And that's fun and exciting. And then I hear from other people that are just breathing in a brown paper bag, and they just feel so disoriented. And, that for them, it's the curse of living in an interesting time. Where are you, and what message do you have sort of at the end of this conversation for folks in both camps? Where do you stand?
Well, I'm an optimist, and I think that this is a great time to be alive, and maybe even a greater time to be born. I think that the cost of living is going down. Not inflation will go down, but the cost relative to what do you get for an hour's worth of work? What does that buy you? There was an era when the average person had one suit of clothes, and I say suit, I mean just one
pair
of trousers.
Outfit. Yeah.
Outfit.
Yeah.
And when we had the Industrial Revolution, spinning thread got cheaper, weaving got cheaper, sewing got cheaper, and people now have closets that are full of stuff we talked about before. And I think that the improvements we're seeing, AI is one, but there are improvements in a wide range of spaces, that the chemicals, biotech, wide variety of areas. We are going to find that it takes less work for the average person to live a comfortable life. We get in the way of that a little bit. We restrict housing construction in many parts of the country, and that's making it that's kind of an exception. But most of the services and goods will be cheaper, so I'm optimistic about that. But there'll be some specialized folks who have made a good living off of something that is being automated away. And if a person is 20, 30, 40 years old, not a concern, because there's plenty of time to reskill. For the person who's 50 or 60, those people, when they lose their jobs, often just leave the labor force and have a less wealthy retirement than they had hoped for. In some cases, it's maybe a fairly crummy retirement. So we will have some folks for whom the change is negative, but for the grand scheme of things, I think I was just reading about life extension, AI helping to find cures for one cause of blindness, a wide variety of ways that I think our lives are going to be better, which leads to a philosophical question that maybe we ought to just throw back to the viewers of this, listeners of this podcast, is people used to find meaning in life just by getting enough food to eat. And then it was, let's have a comfortable standard of living. we're going to have to find meaning in life that goes beyond work. And that's where I think it's important that we give some thought to what's important to us other than work. Things like family relationships, hobbies, challenges that we create for ourselves.
I'd like to throw in a pitch for
That is going to be the
civics.
big challenge. Civics, yes.
Yes. Community.
Community, absolutely.
We hear about
Absolutely.
everybody being so lonesome and isolated and depressed, and come out in the world. We do better when we're together, when we're communicating face to face. I love meeting with you this way. It's better than nothing, but you need to be engaged in your community. And I think that's such a key element of, to your point, a life that is fulfilling beyond stuff. Well, thank you for making the time today. Thank you for the words of wisdom. I am going to read that book and look very forward to it. We just appreciate you giving us a hand in how to think of all this.
Great chatting with you, Mary.
Well, thanks again, Bill. You really made me think about some important things in a new way. Now, audience, for Bill's book, or to sign up for his newsletter, or if you'd simply like to be in touch with him, his website is linked in today's show notes, and all his contact information is there. So until next time, keep planning and executing despite the mixed economic messages. Heck, maybe even dare to feel optimistic, at least for the long run. And keep joining us here at October Research, because we'll keep bringing you the knowledge you need to maintain a truly competitive advantage. And we'll see you next time.